As Joshua, so this week we're going to be talking about youth players. But before we launch into the topic, I have the trivia question for you this week, which is a bit difficult. So I was going to preface it with that. But can you tell me the average salary of a 17-year-old academy player?
Annual or weekly, or what are we talking?
Weekly wage.
I think I think it's £1,500 per week.
You are pretty much spot on there. Yeah, it's 1,450. So is that your football manager knowledge coming out there, Josh?
No, do you know, it's so funny. I had a similar topic for you. I don't know what the topic is, but I had something related to this as well. And I literally this week went and did some research into how much do the youth players earn. So I'm really interested now to hear what your actual topic is, because I was thinking along similar lines by fluke this week.
That is quite interesting. But so what my topic is for you this week, it's actually going to go steer a bit left here. We're going to go kind of into the American territory. And with so many leagues in England, do you think that there's scope for university football to become its own league and become a feeder league into a Premier League?
First of all, that's clearly not at all what my topic was going to be. So it is very left field of what I was going to say. That is interesting. And I think that's very cool football manager kind of topic, something that doesn't get spoken about by the media at all. I don't think there's an opportunity for the university leagues in the US to be feeders for the Premier League, but I do think there's space in the US sort of, they call it soccer leagues, to do something like you have your MLS and do a lot more with a feeder league of university teams and bring that up. Because currently with the American sports, they have similar systems. The draft picks and whatnot are really developed in America for all the other sports, basically. And I don't think they've developed that system enough to utilize that uniqueness for football. The reason I don't think they can do it for Premier League is it's just, I'm not sure the quality would be there in terms of not across the university league, but I mean, the amount of players that they would actually be able to develop to go across would be so few and far between that it would fall flat. It sounds like a funny thing to say, but for an academy or a development league, for example, to actually be a success, it's not about how much the players develop in the league, it's about how many of them actually go across then to the Premier League. So if all of them are developing, but none of them go to the Premier League, it would be seen as a huge failure. And I'll give you actually an example of a league that does it really well, or a development academy that does it really well. In Egypt, they have a football academy there, which both Mo Salah and El Neni came through. And that academy is tied to Basel in Switzerland. And both those players end up going to Basel before going to other European teams. So that's a system where you have an academy which feeds a European team, which then they go from there. But in that case, it's one academy that services the whole of Egypt. I mean, quite a small, the sort of population of Egypt lives in quite a small area, so it's easier to do that than America, where it's quite spread out. The point is you have one academy which kind of services one team in the way of Basel, and then that, like I say, services the rest of Europe. So a system like that, if the US wanted to invest in one giant academy where the best players then come to that academy and then go off to Europe, I could see, but I don't think you could do an academy league and have it be a success.
This is where the real crux of my thing is. And do you think there's space for English universities to try and take advantage of a similar system? Because here's a fact for you. Only 4% of academy players ever make it into a professional league. And that's not just Premier League. That's throughout the whole pyramid, I think it's from League Two. But a lot of those academy players won't go on to university once they fail football. That's not something that generally happens for a lot of those players. They'll pursue football in a different country, or they'll go into the semi-pro leagues in the hope that they can get up into the professionals. Whereas you look at the US model and you start looking at these NFL players and college basketball players who will get a degree and have the ability to then get a big job, a marketing job, that kind of stuff with their degree, while still having the opportunity to be looked at by professional scouts.
So are you saying that we would have a system where you bring in a bunch of university teams into the English leagues, and the safeguard of that is because only 4% of those players would actually make it professional, you're kind of protecting their futures by saying, well, you have to be studying at a university while playing for the university team, therefore kind of helping them ensure that they will have an education and not throw all their eggs into the basket of professional football, or they can't guarantee that.
Yeah, exactly. I think youth players in the UK need to be looked after a little bit more, especially in my view. I feel like there's a lot of youth players who get cut from their team, they start struggling a lot. And I think when you give them the opportunity to get a scholarship to university, they have to study, they have to get a certain level of marks, but then these universities can create their own league, similar to what the college football do in America. They create their league, they play in their league, and then they're still playing against other relatively good academy players, you know? And there'll be players who might want to delay their career a couple of years because you can get marketing opportunities through, especially in America, you get a lot of marketing opportunities as a college football player. So if you get a university football league and it gets funded well enough and it has the ability, you then not only give them the chance to get further education through scholarships, you also give them the chance to be scouted again and again and again by professional teams, because a lot of players only come into their peak around 24, 25. It's very difficult to figure out if an 18-year-old is going to be good or not, which is why some of the academy players fail, but they could make it by 22, 23.
Yeah, I actually think it's a really, on the face of it, I'll say that it's a great suggestion. And I was also, I guess, where I was thinking in a football sense, how would that work? So in South America and in like sub-Saharan Africa, it's actually quite popular to have these university teams. So if you look at, this is now football manager knowledge, funny enough, but if you go to a league like the Chilean league or one of those, you'll see there's actually quite a few university teams in their first division. And I think the simple setup of how you would operate that is if you give a player a scholarship, right? Hey, come get a marketing degree, come get a IT degree, whatever it is, at Oxford, at Cambridge or whatever, you know, you play for us and you can do your studies for free. Most people, even in the UK these days, where it's subsidized if you're born in the UK, they don't have the money to afford a degree at those kind of universities anymore. So by giving them the scholarship, a lot of those players would actually take that up, meaning that a Cambridge, Oxford, whatever, would have a better team because of that. And they could probably, even if you started them in a lower division, they could probably rise up the ranks at a rapid rate because they wouldn't have to pay aggressive salaries to players who probably deserve a higher salary based on their football ability through that. So I think it is actually a really strong idea. I'm trying to think how that works. I guess because it would need to be some sort of system where you have university players, but what happens when they leave the university? How does that contract operate, etc.? It gets a bit messy around that period.
Well, I think when you look into that, it would be, so again, basically on the American college system, you know, what ends up happening there is they have their options. Once you're out of university, if you don't get into the draft for the NFL, then you've got to go get a real job. It's just the unfortunate way of life. And I think it would be a similar thing here. You know, you got 3 to 4 extra years to play football at a good level, get the opportunity to be scouted. And if you don't get scouted, if no one comes knocking on your door, then hey, you walk away with a degree and the ability to get into the workforce much easier than previously.
Yeah. The one thing actually where I strongly agree with you is in the last few years, there's been some great work done by the FA and stuff like that to support players who are retiring. Until players retire, they don't know what to do with themselves now. They were a good amount of money, or depending how good they were as a player, great amount of money, but they don't have skill sets or they're not sure what to do because all they've done for the last 20 years is play football. And the FA have done a great thing about mental health support and also helping a lot of those players find where their passions lie and helping direct them to go towards that. The thought that always occurred to me was that's fantastic, but those guys already have money. And I'm not one of those people saying because you have money, you have no problems in life. I'm not saying, what I am saying is if you have money, you have the ability to buy resources and support to support yourself. Where what you're talking about, there's plenty of footballers who were League 2 player or below, and they pretty much put all their eggs in that basket. They don't have the finances and the money to be able to support themselves. I'm not talking about in life in general. I'm talking about, like, say, pay for mental health meetings twice a week or, expert services, but they're not getting the support. So the Premier League guys get that support basically for free from the FA, but the guys at the bottom of the chain who actually can't afford it, or they get no support. So I think what you're suggesting makes a lot of sense, but there's finally some support for the bottom of the chain, which needs it debatably more than the top.
There are a couple of horror stories in the last couple of years of unfortunate suicides by these young players because they thought they had a career. They thought they had it made by getting into Tottenham Hotspur. For example, it wasn't a Tottenham Hotspur. It wasn't Tottenham. But for example, Tottenham Hotspur's academy, and then being cut at the age of 17, where, they have their schooling, they have their GCSEs, but they're not sure how to get into university. They're not sure where they want to go. And I feel it's a much more difficult choice for these guys because they've worked for a goal for so long. Everyone at the age of 16 has to figure out what they want to do with their life, but not everyone has the pathway laid out to their dream, and then to have that ripped away from you is a very traumatic experience. So I think by including your universities, by either getting them set up in the lower football leagues or creating, like the Americans have, creating an entirely separate league, where it is just the universities playing against each other.
Yeah, what I also like about the suggestion of, kind of sounds like a funny way of putting it, but forcing these players to educate themselves or get degrees behind themselves is, even if they do succeed, they're part of the 4% that go on, have a career. When they get to 30, 35 and they retire, now they've got the football career plus the education. It still helps them anyway. There's no bad in this, and there's no downside to doing this. The other thing is, as you would know, like I know, in pretty much all the first world countries now, how competitive the job market is in general. So my point is, if those players get to 23, 24, they have no degree, no work experience, no tertiary education or post-secondary education, they are then way behind all the competition for getting a job. It's not as simple as, okay, yeah, there's a bit of a mental health crisis because their dreams are not being fulfilled, and now they just go get a regular job and they can't deal with it. I think in most of these cases, they would probably find, A, their dream didn't come true, and B, they can't even get an entry-level job because the competition is so fierce, particularly if you're living in a London, a New York, any of those major cities. The competition is so fierce these days, they wouldn't even be able to get a job like of any meaningful, that they would see any meaningful value in anyway. And then they would that's where I think it spirals, right? It's not just the dream, it's all the things that come with it that would end up spiraling and causing a huge problem for them.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's, like I said earlier, there's got to be a better shift towards creating more opportunities, branching out those opportunities for the young football players and the next generation of football players, especially when you look at the numbers. And you made a very good point about it's not just losing a dream, but it's starting on a back foot compared to other people their age, just because they had a very good footballing ability, which makes it even worse. You had a talent, and unfortunately, you didn't make it, and now you've actually got to start 3 steps behind everyone else because you were talented. I think it's a very unfortunate situation for youth players to be in. But I think this has been a very interesting discussion. I've really enjoyed hearing your thoughts about it. And I would love to hear what our listeners and viewers have to say about it. Do you think that universities should be looked at as an outlet for youth players, or do you think it's not a system that will work in the UK? We'd love to hear from you, so please leave us a like, give us a comment, and please subscribe. Until next time, this has been Football Unspoken. Cheers.